This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Do you like Warhammer 40k? Do you enjoy role-playing games or board games with legacy mechanics? Do you enjoy painting up an army slowly over time and giving all the units names and personalities? If you answered yes to 2 out of 3 of those questions, I really want to encourage you to check out Warhammer 40k 10th Edition's Crusade mode. My playgroup started a Crusade campaign this week, and we've been having a lot of fun with it. So today I'm going to tell you all about Crusade mode, how to start a Crusade if you've ever wanted to, as well as all of our thoughts and impressions of this game mode. Part 1. What is Crusade? Crusade is Warhammer 40k's current solution to a narrative campaign mode. And if you're not familiar with this sort of thing, imagine combining the traditional wargaming rules of Warhammer 40k with a sort of RPG rule set, almost like Dungeons & Dragons. Your characters all have character sheets. They can level up by gaining experience points. You can buy new items for them and upgrades from a shop using currency, as well as giving you an incentive to do a slow grow campaign over time where you paint and add new units to your army. The basic rhythm of this sort of campaign is that you will play a game with a friend, and depending on who wins, what sorts of special agendas you achieve, you then get to mark down points on your little character sheets and spend those points on upgrades for your existing units, or you can spend those points to grow your army's roster. You also keep track of which units got destroyed in each battle as well, and they can accumulate negative buffs called battle scars, which will persist through each battle. The core rules for Crusade are available free online, but they're also in the back of your 10th edition rulebook if you have one of these. So it's pretty easy to start if you're already familiar with the core rules of Warhammer. There are 2 other optional things you might want before starting a Crusade, and the first is your army's codex, because there's optional Crusade rules for your army in this book, and they're all quite fun and interesting, the ones I've seen so far at least. For example, in the Orc Codex, you get access to custom jobs for your vehicles, the bestest boss loot for your war bosses, as well as a little mini game called Stompin' Points, where you're tracking the progression of your WoW and it getting quite unstable, and all of the orcs in your WoW starting to fight with one another and cause problems. Your army's codex will also contain a number of specific versions of the generic perks from the core Crusade rules, such as specific agendas, requisitions, and battle traits to spend your points on instead of just the generic ones. But if you're already playing Warhammer 40k, there's a good bet you already have your army's codex, so definitely recommend using the specific Crusade rules for your army if you have access to it. Not necessary though, the Crusade rules are free online. The other optional thing you might consider using is one of the Crusade expansion books. Games Workshop has put out, I believe, 4 of these so far. They are not necessary to play Crusade. Crusade's not the sort of thing you need to keep up with like the competitive play. I would say that the Crusade expansions are more like adventure modules from D&D. They provide you with a setting and specific perks, specific missions for that setting. So if you're interested in one of those settings, you might want to pick up one of those Crusade books, or in the back of the Leviathan book, if you have the Leviathan version of the core rule book, you get access to the Tyrannic War expansion, which sort of gives you a taste of what these expansion books are like. So it can be kind of fun to use one of these books if you enjoy the theme, if you want to play in the Tyrannic War, or the new Armageddon one that came out looks cool. I haven't checked that one out yet. But again, these are not necessary. The Crusade rules are free. You can play any missions. You don't need to play specific Crusade missions. So in review, if you want to play Crusade, you need the core rules and the Crusade rules, which are free online. And optionally, you will want your army's codex. And very optionally, you can buy one of the Crusade campaign books. The other thing you're going to need if you're going to play Crusade, perhaps this is the most difficult thing you're going to need, is a few friends to play with who are into this sort of narrative campaign mode. I feel really lucky that I have a playgroup who I can get to meet up fairly often and get some games in, but if you don't have that, I really think you could play Crusade mode with just 2 players, and I think it would still be pretty fun. And with all that said, if you've got all of those things, you're ready to start a crusade. Part 2. Building your roster. If you are a player in a crusade mode, the first thing you're going to need to decide is what faction, or I guess factions, there's nothing preventing you from having 2 crusade armies at once, you're going to play. The core rules recommend a starting roster of around 1,000 points, so you're building your army in almost the same way as matched play. We're using the same points. And while the standard is 1,000 points, I don't really see why you couldn't use a smaller point count if you wanted to. A lot of the rules for Crusade are more like suggestions, as you are playing this with probably a small group of people. It's more about the rules that everyone agrees on, much like in a role-playing game. So you're going to start at around 1,000 points, at least that's what we did, and then there's going to be certain abilities in the game which are going to allow your roster to slowly grow over time. So this is a great game mode if you're looking for an excuse to paint more and more models every week to play with, or if you're doing some Stillmania. So once you have your army chosen and you've painted up that 1,000 points or whatever you agreed on, you are then going to need to build your order of battle. Your order of battle is sort of like the character sheet for your army. You can print one of these off for free from the Warhammer website, and you're also going to need to print out a Crusade card, which is like the character sheet for each individual unit in your army. Now, I know this sounds like a lot of work, but honestly, it only takes about an hour, and once it's set up, all you have to do is update these after each battle. The other thing you can do if you don't want to use the official sheets is you can make your own. For example, I decided to buy this old weathered looking leather journal from Amazon to track my order of battle, and I'm going to have my Crusade cards on different pages in here, as well as writing down any other rules and lore that I might want to remember from the Crusade. As a side note, if you do want a journal like this of your very own, or to check out any of the other supplies that I use on this channel, I have made a page full of affiliate links where I'm starting to put all of the common supplies that I use on the channel, and this is all over on my website at howlcorp.com. And coincidentally, it was super easy to put this page together thanks to this video's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website hosting and design tool that I've been using for just a little bit over a decade now for all of my website needs. And it's extremely easy to use. Just pick from one of their beautifully designed templates, or design your own custom template from scratch using their brand new tool, Squarespace Blueprint. I've been using my current website to host a gallery of my painted miniatures, all of my hobby reference documents, including that affiliate link one I was just talking about, as well as an online store, which has been super easy to keep updated, accepts a variety of payment options, which are all built in for you, and it's just all really easy to use. So if you need a website, why not check out squarespace.com today for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/DanaHowl for 10% off your very first purchase of a website or domain. And now back to our video. So first things first, when building a new order of battle, you are going to need to name your Crusade force. My orcs are led by the speed boss Rrrrrose Azerty, who rides on a Deffkilla Wartrike. So let's call our Crusade force Rrrrrose Easy Riders, as we're going to have everything be bike and vehicle themed. Next, you can see we have 3 circles here that need to be filled in with a number, and I'll explain these really quickly. Battle tally is the number of battles you've played with your army, so this is a 0 to start. Victories is the number of battles you've won as part of the crusade, so again, this is a 0. And finally, there is a number called requisition points, and this one is slightly more important. Your requisition points are going to start at 5, and they're going to go up over time, and this is the main currency of Crusade, aside from experience points, which we'll get into later. So as you can probably tell, requisition points and a lot of the Crusade mechanics are really named with the Imperium in mind. But really what they are is it's kind of like your gold pieces almost. This is your currency to spend at the shop. So I'm going to call my requisition points TIF points, as that's the Orky equivalent, I think, of gold pieces. So we're going to spend some of these at the shop later before we start our battle, but for now we're just going to leave this at 5 and move on to the next step. Next, we're going to fill out our supply limit, which at the beginning of our crusade, as I said before, is 1,000 points. This is the number of points that you're able to use when building your roster, but again, as a reminder, this will go up over time, so you might want to use pencil on your sheets, as you will probably erase a lot of these numbers. And the number next to that is supply used, which we will fill in once we've picked all of our units. And that's going to be the total number of points you've consumed. You probably won't have exactly 1,000 points. I think I ended up with 970. So that's pretty much it for our order of battle to start. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go into list building mode, and we're going to build out a crusade card for each unit we want to have in our roster. For me, I own about 900 points currently of painted orcs, so I'm just going to throw all of those into my roster. But I also own a orc truck that I'm going to be building and painting next, I believe. So with the permission of my opponents, I've decided to put that truck onto my roster as well, bringing our total to 970 points. Now, notably, once you've picked your list, this info all gets locked in for the duration of the crusade. So any equipment you pick for your characters, stuff like that, you need to make sure you pick the one you're going to want for the rest of the crusade. There are ways to change it later on by paying currency, but just so you know, in Crusade, those sorts of choices are permanent, and that's a large part of what these Crusade cards are for. For each Crusade card, we are going to start by filling out the name of the unit. And this is not the name of the unit like Defkilla Wartrike, this is the name of the unit like the name you're giving it in the lore, like Rucka Thrillamust. And right below that, you can write what the unit is called, like Defkilla Wartrike. Once you've named the unit, filled out its points cost, the unit type, you can then add any sub-faction keywords it might have, any equipment you've chosen for your units, and that's pretty much it for now. Most of the other stuff on the Crusade cards you're going to fill out throughout the course of the game. Notably, you're also going to leave out any enhancements you want your characters to have, as enhancements work a little bit differently in Crusade mode, and we'll get into that very shortly. But now that we have all our Crusade cards set up, we can then return to our order of battle, fill out all of the names of our units that we've picked, add all of their points values, and make sure that these add up to the total of supply used. So that's all of our character sheets set up, and there's 1 or 2 more things you might want to do before we start our first Crusade battle. First, if you are using a specific expansion pack, or if you are using a specific codex, such as the Orc Codex, you probably want to review those rules right now, as sometimes they have specific other things you will need to keep track of on your character sheets. For example, in the Crusade rules for my orcs, it tells me to pick one of my units to be the Wa boss. This is going to be a special character who gets special abilities throughout the Crusade. So I obviously picked Rucka for this, and I marked it down on his character sheet. And as part of the special orc rules, I'm also going to need to keep track of orc stompin' points, which tracks the progress of my Wa and how unstable it gets, as well as perks that it gets. So I'm going to mark that down next to my other tallies on my order of battle. And finally, before we start our first Crusade battle, we might want to spend some of our requisition points, or Orc Teef, as I'm calling my requisition points. As a reminder, you start it with 5 of these points and you can spend them anytime between battles unless the rules say otherwise. And if you look at those free Crusade rules, there's a page called Requisitions, and it's going to show you the 6 core requisitions that you can spend your requisition points on, but you will also find other things you can spend requisition points on in your army-specific codex. As well as if you are using a Crusade expansion, there's often things in there that you can spend your Crusade points on, requisition points on. Most of these core requisitions are pretty self-explanatory, and a lot of them you're not going to want to buy until you're a few games into your Crusade. However, there are a few you might want to buy before you start your Crusade, so I'm just going to quickly go through the 6 core requisitions that you can purchase from, and which one I decided to buy. Number 1, increased supply limit. This costs 1 requisition point, and it's going to give you an additional 200 points on your order of battle or army roster, whatever you want to call it. Note that this will not affect the amount of points that you can field on the battlefield at once. This is still sort of a matched play thing where you and your opponent are going to agree on a certain points limit for each individual match. But this will increase your roster, which is the units available to pick from when playing individual games. So your army's roster is the total units you can pick from, and your army list might vary from game to game. So for now, I'm not going to purchase this. I don't have any more painted models, so I'm not going to increase my roster. Number 2, Renowned Heroes. This one is probably the most confusingly worded requisition in the core rules, so I did want to address this here. This is one of the main ways that Crusade mode differs from matched play, as this is the way you're going to apply enhancements to your character models. Basically, in Crusade mode, your characters don't have access to all the potential enhancements they might gain from their detachments by default, and you need to buy each one separately using requisition points. And here is how that works. When you first add a character to your order of battle, you can pay 1 requisition point to add an enhancement to them. So for example, we just added Rucka to our roster. We want to add 1 enhancement to him. I want to give him the Wazblasta enhancement from the Cult of Speed detachment, so I will pay 1 RP, or TIF as we're calling those points, bringing my total TIF down to 4. I then update Rucka's card to represent this, and this change is permanent unless I buy this ability again to change up that enhancement. We're also going to need to modify Rucka's points cost, as the enhancements still cost the same amount of points that they cost in match play. The only difference here is that the choice is permanent unless you pay to change it later. Note that this is where it gets a little confusing. Buying this specific requisition costs 1 point more every time you want to buy a new enhancement. So the second enhancement you buy for your army costs 2 requisition points. The third one costs 3 requisition points, and 3 is the most it costs. So once you get up to 3, every additional enhancement you add is going to cost 3 points. One other detail to note is that in Crusade mode, you can take any enhancements you want from any detachment, as you pick your detachments on a match-by-match basis, not as part of your initial order of battle. So you can actually get some really fun combos here that are only possible in this game mode. So you can see why I wanted to talk about that one, as the wording is super confusing, and I hope that explanation was sufficient. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments. The third thing you can buy from the core requisitions is a thing called Legendary Veterans. So this one isn't relevant to us right now, but as your units level up, you are going to find that characters have a higher max limit of experience points and the perks that we get from leveling up, called Battle Honors, than regular units. So this perk just allows you to bypass that limit if you buy it once a regular unit hits 30 XP. So don't worry about it for now. Once one of your units hits 30 XP, you can come back and purchase this. The final 3 core requisitions are extremely easy to understand. The first one, rearm and resupply, lets you change up your war gear between battles. Like we said, war gear is permanent otherwise, so you can pay to change it up between battles. The next one, repair and recuperate, is an ability you're also not going to have to worry about right now, but this is how you remove those battle scars that you might accumulate through battle. And finally, fresh recruits lets you increase the size of a unit. So for example, if I wanted to increase my unit of 3 Defcoptas up to 6 once I've painted a few more, you would do that by buying this requisition. So that is it. That's all of the core requisitions explained. I hope that explanation made sense. And you're probably only going to want to buy the Renowned Heroes one before your first battle if you want to add enhancements to your characters. However, you also might want to take a look at your codex or any expansions you're using, as there are specific things you can spend RP on in those books as well. The Orc Codex does have a number of cool ones, but to keep things simple, I thought I would spend no more of my RP points before I play my first battle. And with all of that prep work complete, we're finally ready to play our first Crusade match. Part 3, my first Crusade match. My first Crusade match was against the Knights of Revel, which is my friend Kreider's Emperor's Children army, and we followed the following steps to prepare for this match. First, we agreed on a point value that worked great for both of us. We chose to play at 780 points, so a bit less than an incursion match, I believe it's called. So we both came up with a list built from our existing rosters, and then we shared this with one another to make sure we were both okay with the lists. And then we picked our first mission, and we decided to use this one from the Necmund Crusade supplement, which saw our armies competing to harvest rare materials from the objective. Between us, we also then decided on a little bit of flavor and setting for this mission. I wanted to use that big boat model in a game, so we decided this would take place in a coastal city at one of the ports, and we set up a board that worked for the mission and for the setting. We have some orc terrain over in the corner, we've got the boat over in the other corner, and the Emperor's Children. We decided we're going to be the attackers because it just made sense. The orcs had their own terrain, so they were clearly the defenders. I think you might sometimes roll off for this, but we just decided between friends that that made the most sense narratively. And that's just kind of one of the fun things you can do when you're playing a narrative campaign like this. You can just agree that things are a certain way. You don't have to follow every single rule. Next, we each needed to pick 2 agendas. Agendas are one of my favorite things from Crusade mode, and basically it's like having 2 side quests which you keep secret throughout the game, and the rewards for these side quests are permanent throughout every mission you're going to play in Crusade. So with our agendas picked, we played through the game as you would normally play a game of Warhammer, but I found a really interesting thing started happening as we played Crusade mode instead of regular Warhammer. Because we'd named all of our units and we'd come up with a little bit of a backstory, we had this flavored mission, we each had our own special agendas, a sort of procedural story started to emerge during the game, much more than it ever has when I've played a matched play game. I found by having all of these extra elements, I felt a lot more invested in the game than I usually would, especially because whatever happened here would affect every game going forward. Also, beyond the game mechanics, I just felt a lot more invested in my army, almost like they were characters who are going to be playing through an episodic story than I would normally in just a competitive match. A part of this was stuff we came up with on our own, but a part of it was also baked into the game mechanics of the Crusade. The Knights of Revel, for example, were here to collect genetic material to use in their crafting minigame from their Crusade rules. Meanwhile, I had decided that the orcs were here to attract a mech boy by collecting all sorts of shiny gubbins, as I need a mech boy to get some of my upgrades in my Crusade supplement. So the rules kind of helped inform the story in a really fun way. As we played through, we also made sure to keep track of which units were destroyed, which ones survived, which ones did notable things or created certain rivalries, as a lot of these things will be relevant in the post-game where we're going to tally up a bunch of this stuff. Beyond this, the most fun part about the game for me was the agendas. I picked these two agendas from the Orc Codex, and it really influenced the way I played the mission, as these two side quests offered me a lot of really compelling rewards if I completed them, even if I didn't win the battle. My first agenda, Scrag Dachiliest Gits, was all about killing the enemy with the highest points value, and that happened to be the Terminators. The other thing I really liked about these agendas is that most of them have multiple tiers of completion and rewards, so you could partially complete it and get a little bit of experience, or you could fully complete it and get even more experience, as well as some stompin' points, which is my orc-specific mechanic. So I did manage to complete this first one fully. I got 3 experience points to award to my Rocket Riders for bringing the Terminators below half strength, and my weird boy, Druka, got another 3 experience points for delivering the killing blow against these Terminators. And like I said, for completing both of these, I get 3 stompin' points, which I can apply to my total for growing my WA between games. The second agenda, Overwhelming Aggression, was perhaps even more interesting because it completely changed the way the game ended. So the way this one works is you get 2 XP basically to award to a unit if you control more units than your opponent in each quadrant at the end of the game. So you could potentially get up to 8 XP if you controlled all of them, and then you get an additional reward if you control every quadrant at the end of the game. So as we had just finished turn 2 and we were going into turn 3, I was realizing there was no way I was going to win this match. The Emperor's Children pretty much had me outgunned. I only had, I believe, 3 of my units left. So what I decided to do was to just basically forfeit the game, but complete my agenda to get that XP. Because for me, it was more important to level up my guys than to necessarily win this one battle. It was also narratively quite interesting because pretty much everyone who was left were goblins, and it made sense to me also in my head that goblins would flee instead of trying to fight the enemy. So it really worked out. We basically ended the game right after turn 2, and we basically decided that my units were just going to run to the edge of the board so that they would technically complete one of those agendas. So I would get 2 XP to give to my second set of Rocket Riders. So in summary, I really like agendas as a player who isn't prone to winning very many matches, as it gives you this optional extra thing to go for if you don't think you're going to win, and you can still get lots of benefits from completing those side objectives. Part 4, post-game. After our first game, there was even more fun to be had, as now we get to calculate all of our points and level up our guys. To begin, we check to see if any of our units accumulated battle scars throughout the game, and the way this works is super easy. You just roll a d6 for every unit that got destroyed during the match, and if you roll a 1 on that dice, that unit gets a battle scar. There's a table in the core Crusade rules from 1 to 6 of the different battle scars you can get, and while you can choose them, you can also roll a d6 to see randomly which battle scar you get, and I think that's the option we're going with, but regardless, none of our units ended up getting battle scars, so we moved on to the next step. The next step in the post-game is to calculate your experience points. So any unit that participates in the battle, even if they were destroyed, they each get 1 experience point. You can mark that down on their card. We also updated our kill counts on our cards at this point, as for every 3 kills an enemy gets, you get to gain another experience point. So I didn't get up to 3, but eventually I will, so you gotta make sure you keep track of all the kills you get. And finally, you get to choose one of your units that participated in the battle as being marked for greatness. And this means you get to award them 3 experience points, which is quite a lot. For instance, to get the first level, you only need 6 experience points. So 3 experience points is quite a lot of experience points to gain for a single unit. So I really like this mechanic, as it allows you to sort of choose the unit that stood out the most during the battle and sort of deserves that upgrade, or you can sort of choose one of your units who's a little bit behind on the experience curve and decide to level them up with the rest of your guys. Personally, I chose to award this to Druka, my weird boy, as I think he had the most heavy impact on the game. He got 2 of the objectives, which were to capture genetic samples, extract them from the points, and he also survived. He was one of my few units who survived at the end, so I just thought it was fitting that he was the one who would be marked for greatness. Finally, both Druka and Scragget's Rocket Riders, one of my Rocket Rider units, each got 3 experience points from the agenda they completed. And my second Rocket Riders unit, Drillbow's Rocket Riders, got 2 experience points for completing that agenda at the end of the game, where I had 2 units on a quadrant and Kreider just had 1. So totaling all of these up, most of my units just got a few experience points, but Druka had a total of 7, which means that he leveled up. You only need 6 points to level up to the first rank, which is Blooded. So when your units level up, you get to award them what's called a Battle Honor. And you can pick from a number of different tables in the core rules for these Battle Honors. You can also pick from a number of different tables or options in your codex. So there's a lot of different things you can pick for this. And personally, I decided to try and pick something that would narratively make the most sense, not just tactically make the most sense. So I had a lot of options to pick from, but I ended up picking this Crusade relic from the Tyrannic War expansion, and it's called Biosplint Gland. I thought this really matched the theming of the match, where we were fighting over genetic samples. So we've got this weird gland that Druka has added to, I think, probably somewhere on his guitar, and that's going to be his battle honor for this match. Notably, when you add a battle honor to a character, you will also need to add 1 crusade point to that character as well, or 2 crusade points if the unit is Titanic. So crusade points are essentially a way to track how much more powerful your army has gotten from the standard loadout, as you're going to get all kinds of battle traits and boons and stuff you can buy from the shop throughout the crusade, and your army is going to get more powerful. So crusade points are a way of tracking how much more powerful your army is from your opponents. And there's also these things called crusade blessings. So when you are preparing to play a game with your opponent, if they have a certain amount of crusade points more than you, you can pick crusade blessings to balance things out. I also got 1 more stompin' point in addition to the 3 I got from that one agenda. So I now have 4 total stompin' points. I believe I need 9 to get to the next level of my WA. So for now, there's nothing there to worry about. But we also each get 1 more requisition point for completing the battle. So I now have 5 requisition points. I don't think I'm going to spend any of them before my next match, but there are a lot of things in the book I could spend them on, so I'll have to think about that before my next battle. Conclusions. So would I recommend Crusade mode? Yes, absolutely. I would say on a scale from something to something else, I had at least twice as much fun playing Crusade as I did playing regular Warhammer. I feel much more invested now that there's a sense of continuity and a little bit of narrative, and I'm really, really excited to start adding more upgrades to my guys and painting more models for my orc army to use in future Crusade battles. One of the things I really like about the Crusade mode is it scratches that RPG itch for me without having to commit to a long campaign and scheduling multiple people for like a D&D game, for instance. I like that this still has a sense of narrative and a sense of progression without having to schedule so many people. You can just schedule games between individuals. I feel after even just this one game and naming all of my units, I feel much more attached to my orc army than I did previously. And I think that a part of this is that a lot of the principles of Crusade actually line up rather well with the principles of Stillmania, which is that video I made a few weeks ago. So check that out if you haven't checked that out. So in conclusion, I would highly recommend Crusade if you are a player who enjoys these sorts of continuity and narrative elements versus the more competitive element of the game. So that's about it for today. Let me know down in the comments if you've tried Crusade mode or if I've convinced you to try it. I'd love to see what the community thinks about this game mode. I really wish I'd known about this earlier. I would have been playing it a long time ago. Thank you, as always, to all of our wonderful, generous patrons who keep the lights on around here. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for all of your donations. This week, I would especially like to thank Bobby Lasers. And with that, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.